So how is your kid?
He's okay. He's had a fever, and he started going crazy about his jaw. But he seems to be okay.
He came home.
Yeah, we're home. He fell asleep on the way to the hospital, and so we didn't know what to do with him then. False alarm.
All alarms are false.
Okay.
Or what they call false positives.
Yeah.
But there's a reason for it. Imagine that you and a buddy were going down a pathway in really, really ancient times where all you had was a spear. And you hear a rustle behind you. Your buddy takes off running, but you're curious. You want to turn around to find out what it was. Guess which one got eaten?
I'm a curious guy.
The curious one. That's why there is so little curiosity in the world, is because it didn't make it. Only the oversexed fraidy cats have made it into the human race. Welcome to the human race. And so the question is, can we transcend that? The answer is, well, since all of that is primitive instinct, and we do have a higher brain, the frontal cortex, then much of what is becoming actually human, the highest quality of human, is for the human brain to be in charge of the reptilian brain, so that the reptilian brain doesn't continue its preservation instinct. In other words, when we finally come to the conclusion that everything is actually okay, and everything is all right the way that it is, that doesn't nothing need to be done, and don't nothing need any help, and if everybody had that opinion, what a wonderful world this would be. Yeah. So that's noble. The noble is to stop doing, and the ignoble is to do what you're told to do. That's what low class people do. They do what they're told to do. Our society is, in fact, nothing but a big human nest where when you're going to live in the nest, you have to do what you're told to do. And now you're living in a society that's full of rules. The whole planet is nothing but one big human nest. And while there are some differences, every culture or every society has its own set of rules. And that everybody in that society has to follow those rules. And one of the issues about the rules in America is thou shalt not be satisfied. Thou shalt work and strive and get more and do more and have more.
Be
And
more.
someday you will be satisfied. And doesn't anybody get satisfied? In fact, a lot of guys have the idea that after I retire, I'll be satisfied. But the surprise is the number of guys who die within 2 years after they've retired. They have no more reason to live now. They're bored to death, and they're sick and tired of living the way they've been living. With no way out, they X themselves, mostly by accident, on purpose, accidentally on purpose. Happens a lot.
Yeah.
Well,
Or
if
they
that's
sit on the couch and watch westerns.
well, hey, that's an improvement. That's a definite improvement. So long as they're just watching the old westerns and not actually yelling at the people around them.
A little bit of that too. My grandpa.
Yeah. So that's the whole point is that we're supposed to do more and more and more in order to get some reward. If you think about it, that's the law of karma that is at the basis and foundation of all societies. If you work and do good, you will get a good reward. And if you do bad, we'll find some way to punish you. We'll get a bad action going for you, which means do what you're told and follow the rules.
Yeah.
But when you recognize that karma doesn't work like that actions give immediate results. It's a here now situation. Everything is in the here now. And so all karmic actions that have karmic results that have to do with the cause and effect relationship, not because of magic or society or police trying to hunt somebody down or any of that kind of stuff. So when we find out that, oh, wait a minute, if I'm looking for satisfaction, if I'm looking for joy, if I'm looking for, let us say, the benefits of all of the work in my life, why not take those benefits now and forget the work part? Because the work, doing the work is kind of spotty. We don't know whether we'll get any rewards or not. And so why not? Why not just quit? Why not just drop out? And I'm not talking about physically with your job yet. There's a whole lot to look at first before that happens. But at least you can stop worrying about it and live the life that you have to do when you go to work in the here now and start to enjoy it. We've got a whole lot of little tools that we could use to put that to work.
Mm.
But the outcome then is that the mind becomes noble. It becomes pristine, or actually a way to say it is above it all. You could even use the word aloof. They use the word helicopter, Mom. Think of it as a helicopter brain, that we kind of rise above all of the stuff. Hopefully we're not making a lot of air wash. So that as we're taking off, we don't wash everything away with the air, downcoming air, rather that it's kind of a rising. Remember that I was telling you about samadhi, or the coming together of the mind?
Yes.
At that point inside of a dome. So here's a question: how do they paint that middle point, that hardest to get to area? How could they paint that? Do they have to put up scaffolding? But let's change the question to, how can a human being such as yourself reach to that pinnacle that you are actually capable of doing, the highest point of humanity that you can reach for yourself? How are you going to get there? Are you going to have to build some sort of scaffolding to get up to that point? Or are you just really going to cut the ties that are holding you to the ground, your own gravity, so that you naturally float up to that place?
Yeah. Seems more like that.
Yeah. So what we have to do is to cut the bondage, to cut the ties that keep us. That many Asian teachers will tell students that they're already enlightened. They're already enlightened. You have actually little enlightenment moments, little Nibbana moments happen from time to time, or we'd burn ourselves to death. We'd burn our brains out if we didn't have little pieces now and then. The question is, how can we just figure out what those are and how to remember to have them and what to do to get in them more and more often, so that we get a mind fit for work, and we can actually, with that mind fit for work, really pay attention to the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path, and how the mind works, how the mind functions to get into suffering, or how you can change the function of the mind so that it doesn't wind up in stress and tension and sorrow and I want it and don't have it. And oh, I'm satisfied with not having it. So that's why it's a skill to be developed, is because it goes against our old habits of wanting and then feeling bad because we don't have what we want. And learn to be free so that we don't want it. I like it, but I don't want it.
Yeah.
And so by cutting those kind of ties, we will naturally rise to that high, noble position. And one of the examples that we've been talking about is that when a Dhamma teacher wants money for teaching Dhamma, that's something that grounds them or binds them downward.
Right.
But if they're already up there to the top, then they're going to give the Dhamma free because they're floating free. They don't need anything. And that's the state that you want to get into. And yet, for some reason, a lot of Westerners have gotten the model of, oh, I can't really become enlightened, but at least I can learn enough about the Dhamma so that I can teach others. And then I can make some money off of it, maybe even a living off of it. That's exactly the same model that psychology has. That people go into a therapist as a client, they start learning about psychology and all of that kind of stuff, but they wind up being dependent upon the psychotherapist and or not really solving some of the deeper issues that they've got. But the more they learn about the psychology, the more they recognize, oh, well, if I can't be cured by psychology, at least I can become a psychologist. So that same syndrome that you see in psychology winds up happening in Buddhism. And with that, both the psychology and the Buddhism are failures, each in their own right.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to warn you about that so that you can pay attention to, in your own life, what Dhamma teachers are worth looking at, because you will have other Dhamma teachers.
Yeah.
We all go around. Nobody goes to first grade with the same teacher 12 years in a row and then gets a high school diploma.
It's hard to tell sometimes. There's so many of them out there, and even the guys writing books and on YouTube, and um, it's hard to know, sometimes which ones are full of crap. I think there was something going around about, I don't know if you know this guy Muji. Have you heard of him?
Say the name again, please.
Muji. He's do you know Papaji is he's in that lineage, or supposedly?
Is this this is not Theravada. Those are
Uh
not Theravada names. Sound Indian.
yeah, oh, yeah, it is Indian. But he's not Indian. He's like South African. But anyway,
Okay.
he just got caught in a huge scandal, um along a cult type line. I don't know if you saw Wild Wild Country, or if you know about um, Osho.
Yes, I went to see him in the 1970s.
Oh wow,
Yeah, I saw Osho. He was Rajneesh then. He wasn't Osho until many years later.
right. Same sort of situation with this guy, um, having a compound, calling it an ashram, and it's sort of a sex ring going on with him and his followers. But there are just a lot of people who you think you could trust, but it's hard to tell sometimes.
Well, let me ask you this question, which may sound strange. If you were a Christian and moved into a town, how would you know which church to join?
I wonder that sometimes. I don't. I, I wonder how when Christians move into town, how they pick out the church. But maybe your denomination or um,
That's one of the
the
main ways is Baptists that move out of one time tend to join a Baptist church in the next town, even if those two Baptist churches are nothing like each other. At least they have the name.
hmm yeah.
But from a higher perspective of looking at it from morality, it would seem like then that a church that did not work on, talk about, or think about money would be superior to those that are having collection plates and money and all of that. In other words, you go into the service from start to finish and there's no collection plate.
I don't know of any churches like that.
All there is at the back of the church some kind of bucket or something for people to throw money in when they're
Gotcha.
leaving. Okay. Um, but passing an offering plate has expectations to it. So even that money is not freely given. It's given because of the obligations that the church has set up. So even
That's
that has its own problem. That the Dhamma, the Buddha taught the Dhamma freely available. And it's always been that way as part of the heritage. But um, though there were some changes when it went to China, like it was hard for the monks in China to go bendabat, so they became gardeners.
yeah.
But they had to break a rule about gardening, which was that the Theravada monks don't dig in the earth, so the Chinese monks do. So there was some changes in that kind of realm. But these were kind of practical things, mostly because in Asia that it was nobles who were spreading the Dhamma. And so that noble went in and worked with the organizations and the groups and whatever like that, trying to teach them in whatever ways that they could figure out how to teach them. And voila, you wind up with Chan Buddhism and then Zen and a very strange mixture of Mahayana and Theravada that you find in Vietnam. Theravada coming in from the south through Cambodia and the Mahayana coming down from China. Very interesting. And yet they have merged
Mm.
because the core teachings, everybody recognizes that it's the same. The Mahayana teaching and the Theravada teaching is actually the same teaching that leads to the same liberation, which is this high, noble mind. But within the Theravada and the Mahayana is a lot of magical thinking. A lot of people still have magical thinking. That the magical thinking was kind of built in right from the beginning because there were a lot of monks, even in the Buddha's time, that came in with magical thinking. Ananda, his own attendant, had magical thinking right up until after the time of the Buddha's death.
Mm.
When we come out of the magical thinking, that's when we realize, oh, it's completely up to me and I can do this.
What do you think about all of the sort of the magical things that I guess Buddha claimed to do himself?
He doesn't.
Okay.
In fact, the suttas are very, very specific in many cases. One of them that's the lion's roar.
Okay.
By that name is very famous. And in that sutta, there is a line in it that starts with Itipiso Bhagava Araha Samasambuto Icha Sarana Lakavo Lakavidu, which means knower of the world and all of that. This is actually a kind of a magical statement that people have locked onto and recite.
Mm-hmm.
I have forgotten it all, but I used to just spit it right out. um, but here's the point. The line above that is a line where the Buddha asked Sariputta, how can it be with the knowledge of the actual teaching that anyone could think this? And then it lists all of these magical qualities of the Buddha. In other words, you look at the actual teachings of the Buddha and you do not find any of that magic, but you have to really know how to read the suttas.
Gotcha.
Because if people have magical thinking and doing the translations into English, then they're going to translate the magical thinking in a stronger way than rather metaphor. But if you have a noble, a wise one who is doing the translations, then the translations will be more correct, seeing metaphor as metaphor. This is one of the things I find really quite curious, and that is the Thai translations of the suttas into the Thai language. Because I've got a friend who is at that level of the Dhamma that even though he's an American, when he reads the suttas, he reads them in Thai. He does contracts and a lot of other stuff like that. So he's really, really good at the Thai language. And he's also a big fan of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. So we've got somebody that I can really trust. And yeah, I've asked him to check things out. What does it say in this sutta or that sutta in the Thai? And he always gives a really excellent answer because the Thais have translations that are noble translations, but we're in English, there's so much magic still in it. So no, the Buddha never claimed anything. And in fact, much of the really crazy magical stuff seems to have come out of a book called The Light of Asia that was done by Christopher Humphreys, who was associated with the group that became the Polytech Society. And this book, I think, came out in the 1940s. And it was a big hit. And that's where all of the magic is. The magic about the white elephant and a Buddha being born out of the side of his mother. Well, guess what? That's true for every woman. What side does a baby come out of? It comes out of the front side, but it's still a side. It doesn't mean the left side or a hip or anything like that. It's really a crazy way of looking at things because of the mistranslations.
Right.
Even the story of the Buddha leaving his home at the time when he left is all magicalized in the sense that he was supposed to have been cloistered in the temple or the palace because his dad was afraid that he would do something strange. But one night he snuck out, and when he snuck out, he saw an old person, a sick person, a corpse, and a monk. And so he comes back to the temple and plots his way to leave secretly. And that's the story that is often told. But that's not the way that it was at all. In fact, there's really strong evidence that he was a trained warrior, that he dealt with he was a horse trainer. He was a charioteer. He was mostly an elephant trainer, and he uses elephants in his sutras a lot because he was around them a lot. He knows how to train them and grab them, go into the woods and get them and that kind of stuff. Also, we know that he was very, very well trained in the Vedas. And we know who trained him because he was one of the guys who left with the Buddha. And that what it appears to be from documentation that's been dug up by historians in India, mostly Dr. Ambedkar, who is quite responsible for helping Buddhism come back to India. He says that it was because of a water fight, that the river had changed course because of a flood or something. And because of that, there were tribes that were having difficulty with it. And that the Sakyans, his clan, wanted to go to war and the prince was dead set against it. It was that conflict when he says, okay, I'm out of here. If this is what politics is like, I don't even want to be king. But when he left with an entire troop of people. He left with his own horse. When he left with a horse and a groom. He left with his main teacher. He left with 4 or 5 people. He eventually let the horse go and chopped his hair off. And this is all well known and well documented. It's just not a story that I'm telling. But everyone in the West seems to have gotten the magical stories, even the magical stories of his enlightenment, to where actually it was an actual real occurrence. And he recognized it all. The state of first jhana, which is what I practiced when I was a child under the tutelage of Kondanya, is the Brahman's name, who also became the first one to actually understand the Buddha. He was one of the 5 disciples that was hanging around. And then when Buddha's Sangha began to grow, Kondanya was always on the podium with the Buddha because he was the first. And then when Mahamagala and Sariputta started to teach, that's when Kondaya decided that he would go. And so he went off into seclusion, off into the woods, and lived for 12 or more years. So he was really an old man because he was an adult when the Buddha was born. So that's a very curious story about that guy, because when you understand his life story, it really takes a lot of the magic out of the story of the Buddha and puts it into the real context. And more than likely, the king had sent Kundaya with him when he left. That in fact, when the Buddha left, it was with goodbye kisses and everybody was hugs and all of that. It was only his wife that was ticked off because she was pregnant at the time. And the child's name, he came back after he was enlightened and came back home to make friends again with all of his family and straighten things out. And the wife was still ticked off. And so she told her son, who was about 7 at that time, go get your inheritance from your dad. Now, what that was supposed to mean was, you've been a really, really bad father. Your inheritance has been here and you have forsaken your inheritance. But what the Buddha heard was, oh, the inheritance is the Dhamma. And he ordained that child and took him with him and really ticked off the wife. His name was Rahula.
Rahula.
And that means one of the fetters. That's one of the words for fetters. Because the Buddha says, okay, he's a fetter. In other words, he's a responsibility that I gladly take on.
Yeah. I think in the West, all the magical stuff, a lot of people get the misconception about enlightenment that it's this magical thing or something that's not attainable by anyone but, the Buddha himself or something.
Exactly. But when you think about it as a really, really high-class human being, then you recognize, oh, well, I can do that. A magical Buddha, I don't think I can do. I'll have to wait to another lifetime whether I get one or not. But being really high-class human being, that's doable. I can do that. And that's actually the supramundane. The supramundane is rising above those who want to aspire to a goal that's impossible to attain. Wanting things you can't have is suffering. Being satisfied with who you are is being free from suffering. Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
And so all we have to do is constantly remember that. That's what Santi is all about. So this is one aspect that we've just talked about, is an aspect of noble right view. The noble right view is to rise above it all, to not be worried about the lower things of wanting a magical enlightenment. That being free from wanting enlightenment is a kind of enlightenment all on its own. Free from the desire of wanting to be special.
Yeah.
Yeah, that because if I'm enlightened, then boy, am I special, at least to me. But if I use the word, then I expect everybody to start bowing and scraping. But here's the point, and that is how many people who want to claim that they're enlightened actually think, oh, if I'm going to say something like that, that means I'm going to have to live up to it. And I have to live up to it every moment. I cannot let that crown slip. So now the question is, do they have the quality of mindfulness so that they don't get tired?
But if you really are enlightened, then it's effortless.
And not only that, but so is the label.
Right.
And because the label is effortless, why bear it? Why claim anything? Claiming something is actually asking for people to set you up as a target.
Yeah. Wanting to be special is just bringing suffering on yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I can see it. And even when I'm meditating, you can see the pretense of your ego and your mind, and it's like, how do you break out of it?
Watch it.
Yeah.
Not wanting anything from it other than the curiosity to be able to watch it. The desire, if there's any desire, is to be there to watch it when it comes up. What we would call being on guard, or be here now, or being there for it. Once you see it, here's an example. You know what a stroboscope is?
A stroboscope?
Yes. It's a machine that emits a bright light that's supposed to be used in a dark room, but the bright light is on a short timer so that it only gives a very short burst of light and then turns off for a certain period of time and then shows back up again. They use these on a quick level in discos, if you know what a disco is. Okay.
Strobe light. They just call them strobe lights when I was a kid.
Okay. All right. It's okay to play with words. The actual name of it is stroboscope.
I like that better.
So here's the point then, that if someone is standing in the room where the stroboscope light is going on and off and stays off and then on and off, we begin to see more and more. And in the beginning, we see only just a little bit. But when it strobes the second time, we see more. When we get it strobed the third time, we're beginning to understand. We strobe it a fourth and fifth and sixth and eighth and 10th time. You start looking, you begin to see things that are there, though in actuality, they're in the dark. One by one, as we start to pay attention stuff, we begin to figure out what's there that normally is hiding in the dark. That's exactly the method we're going to use with the mind. And every time that your awareness comes up, every time your mindfulness is there, and every time you do an investigation is like the strobe going off one time. I like that cute little smile you've got. Insight.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's always right here, right now oriented. It's not that I'm going to build up some paramis that's going to give me an advantage later. No, the skill development is to be here now, to practice those skills in the here now over and over and over again, and then the dots start to collect together. The information begins to be seen correctly. And the student begins to understand, oh, this does how the mind works. It works exactly the way that it's spoken of in the scriptures when we learn how to read them. And it generally takes a teacher to walk the students through this whole sequence of events of how the mind works. and it's called Paticca. Have you ever heard of that term?
No.
Okay, it's also known as dependent origination in English.
I've heard of that.
All right, look at the words dependent origination. In other words, whatever originates, whatever starts due to a dependency. This is actually, Paticca means literally cause effect relationship. That one thing happens after another, after another, after another. One thing causes the next, and sometimes they're interrelated so that two or more items are the cause, and the effect does this, and then the next cause and effect is that a whole lot of stuff is possible to happen based upon conditions. So this is how the mind works, and that's the description in Pali is Paticca. Once the student begins to pay attention and wake up and be here now over and over and over, then we can have this teaching. If we add the teaching right from the very beginning, it will be meaningless to the student because they're not paying attention to what the mind is doing generally anyway. So by learning how to pay attention to what's going on, then we direct it to what's going on inside the mind with this map that the Buddha has set up. And we wind up figuring out how the mind actually works so that it winds up in suffering. And that really takes the magic out of everything because it's just now a sequence of events, a set of processes that happens inside the human mind. Without a deva, without a spiritual guide, without a God, that all of that stuff is created within the mind according to conditions. So when we figure that out, then we can say, oh, that answers the question, what's it all about, Alfie? You know that song? What's it all about, Alfie? It's a song of great remorse and disappointment, and got a whole movie around it. Okay, so what's it all about? Yeah, so what's it all about, Alfie? Is the loser's lament, saying, "Why me? What's it all about? How come this happened?" Which means that there's a kind of a deep dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
But that's at a very, let us say, low mind that's in great suffering. But when we recognize that, oh, what's it all about is a mental process. That's what it's all about. And that mental process is happening right here between the ears. And only then when we figure that out can we recognize, oh, that means that there is something that can be done. That the mind does not have to go through a sequence of events that winds up in suffering. It can go through a sequence of events and then we can make a slight change in the direction through wisdom. By merely seeing what's going on, we can begin to shift the feelings. And the very first shift would be from I like it to and I want it. So I like it, but I don't want it. But we have to be able to see that feeling of liking so that we can change its direction. And so this is the subtle qualities of the mind that we will begin to explore so that you can understand then basically the Paticca is nothing but the second noble truth. And students in the West are not, one version of it is quite common, coming out of the Visuddhimagga, is a 3 lifetime version, where it takes 3 lifetimes to go through the Paticca. But the correct way of looking at it is, oh no, it barely takes 3 seconds. barely takes 3 seconds, not 3 lifetimes. But in that 3 seconds, you can actually live through 3 lifetimes, mental lifetimes.
Right.
So the magical version of Paticca Samuppada is the 3 lifetime version. And that version also supports rebirth, another magical position to take. But when you recognize, oh no, this is all about the process of the mind, and that whatever that could possibly be done, whatever high space the mind can get into, that state can be in this lifetime, does not have to wait and get it as a reward for what I'm doing in this lifetime. That it can be achieved directly. And so this is another way of why it's important to take the magic out of it so that the students can really get it. And then there's the whole idea of the third noble truth, and that is we need to start spending time in that third noble truth to investigate it, to pay attention to it, to attend wisely to what is it like to be free from suffering. Yeah, that's what it's like. To just let it out, just hang out, to be free from suffering, free from wanting to get the things that will then set you free. Just be free now. It's called like the direct approach. It's like, duh, here it is. There's actually a sutta in the Sutta Nipata, one of the very old ones, where the guy is just cooling down the road. And then he thinks, why am I running so hard when I could merely walk? And as he was walking down the road, he saw a shade tree. And he says, well, why am I walking down this hot road when I can stand in the shade? And when he got over to the shade tree and was standing there, he noticed that someone had left already a seat prepared right under the shade tree. And so he says, oh, why am I standing when I could go sit down? All right. If you think about it, these are actually the stages of the practice of Buddhism. Is first to stop running, and then stop going. And then when we're standing, to realize that we don't even have to put in that much effort, that we can sit down and enjoy our lives.
Sounds easy.
It is easy. You just won't get a lot of support for it out in the out in the open world out there, because they're still money grubbing.
Yeah.
It is easy. And you know when it's the most easy? It's when you remember to do it.
Mm.
If you don't remember to do it, it's really hard.
Yeah.
So here's something that I would give you as a gift. First off, all of the meditation practice that the students in the West think have to do with sitting in silence, possibly in a group, in a particular posture or two, and doing a particular exercise of the mind. That's what they call meditation. Okay. But if we take the emphasis away from that English language word meditation and bring it to the point that we would call mental development, and that it's being put to good use as mental development, and let's say that the student is intending to do that an hour a day. And what that looks like is then, from another perspective, that means that he's 23 hours a day is going to be reverting back to the old bad habits. So which one is going to break through? The 23-hour practice of bad habits or the 1 hour practice of good habits?
Mm.
This is why progress would be slow. We have to start practicing this throughout the day. so that more and more often throughout the day that we have sati, we have that remembrance to wake up, then the more often we can experience a little Dhammana moment or two. We can experience that third noble truth. We can experience this is what it's like to be free from suffering.
Yeah.
So, one of the ways that I'm teaching the students now, I've got several techniques, but I'll give you one of them now. And that is, how many times do you get up out of a chair and sit down in the chair a day? When you sit down, how often do you sit down in the chair a day?
A lot, because I have a standing desk, but I have a seat. I have to sit. I have to get up and down a lot. So
Okay.
50, 60 times a day, something like that.
All right, so now we've got the opportunity to practice the Dhamma 60 times a day. What you're going to practice is every time that you sit down, let me ask you this. When you sit down, why do you sit down?
Because I'm tired of standing.
Okay, all right. So you're saying perhaps you're taking a load off.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, I just told you the sutta about why am I standing when I could sit down. So as you're sitting down, make sure that you do take a load off, but not just to load off the feet, you're going to also take a load off the mind. So the sitting down is now an anchor or a trigger for mindfulness, for sati to come up and get really strong. Every time you sit down, you're going to sit down with gusto. Most specifically, the word gusto has the word gust in the sense of an exhale, a gust, all right, a let go. This is what you're going to do. You're going to actually start practicing the third noble truth of being free from it all, to take a load off the feet, a load off the mind. You're going to sit there and have a moment. So if you're sitting down, for instance, to get to a keyboard, instead of sitting down and then going to the keyboard, you sit down and feel good for a little bit. This is so nice. And then you go to the keyboard a little bit later so that you begin to have little Dhammana moments. How good are they going to be? As good as you like them to be in that moment. That's how good they will be. And pretty soon you'll start saying to yourself, oh, I like this. Oh, this is good. Oh, I like that one. And that's the way that you do. And so you start practicing that 60 times a day, and mindfulness will start to come. That's what you're going to build up, is to remember to take the right effort. And that right effort is to bring the mind into a state of joy, into a state of relaxation, into a state of comfort over and over and over again. And if you do that, by the time you get into that 1 day course, you'll really be ready for it.
Okay. Yeah, I've tried for a while to do mindfulness throughout the day, but I think that's a good I probably put too much effort in it, but the way you're putting it, by taking a load off, is it's better.
Yes, the students in the West, they put far too much effort in it.
Yeah.
Far too much effort. Make it easy. That's the whole point. Why work at being relaxed? That makes no sense. But it's part of our culture. We take good advice and we turn it into a rule rather than a mindfulness toy. So let this just be a toy to play with.
Yeah. As for the day itself, though, um, I don't think probably the longest I've ever meditated is an hour and 30 minutes or something like that. I've never done a full day.
Well, they break it up. It's not
Okay.
just sitting. It's sitting, and then the timer goes off, and then you take a break, and then they put the timer back on, and then you sit again, and then they take a break, and now you do walking meditation. Somebody will say something or another, and it's broken up throughout the day. It's not
Okay.
all sitting all the time.
Yeah. I've just gotten to a point where I can sit comfortably on a cushion and my back isn't bothering me as much anymore. Um, I used to just sit in a straight back chair just so I wouldn't have to think about my back. But I figure if I was going to go to group meditation, I'd probably have to sit on a cushion. So um, my back was really bothering me for whatever reason.
More than likely because
Distracting
you
me.
were working too hard,
Yeah. Yeah.
expecting too much.
Yeah. I think I found the perfect balance between having my spine straight and relaxing at the same time. There's like a balance there that I
You
that I
don't, you
found.
don't, you don't have to keep the spine straight. In fact, the spine has a natural curvature.
Yeah.
Students who try to make the spine straight by, say, sitting against the wall to feel what it's like to get the spine straight, and then trying to sit like that, it's not a good idea.
It's never
Always have that point in the small of the back
right.
where you can slide your hand,
Mhm.
all right, because there's that curvature in it. That there's a place in the back where when the spine goes in. And so you want to allow that to be. One of the techniques is to, as you're sitting up, imagine that there is a string that's coming right out of the top of the head and that it pulls you up. And then imagine that that string is cut somehow and that you just settle straight down, intentionally settling so that you're not trying to keep the back straight. You're actually trying to just merely sit up. Now, the sitting up or the sitting up straight is mostly because of gravity. If we're
Mm.
sitting leaning like that, then it's putting pressure on this part to keep this part from falling over. All right. But if
Yeah.
you can sit up straight, then we pull we're pulling straight down. And so almost all of the weight then goes onto the buttocks, which is on the cushion. And so um, that's the most relaxing way to sit. So long as your head is up is the most important because most students will have their head down, and then that will cause neck pain, back pain, other things like that. So make sure that the head is pulled straight up.
I kind of feel like I'm balancing it on the weight of it, the weight of my head.
Good, good, good. So you won't have to sit for very long, an hour
Mhm.
at the most, and then they'll have some sort of change up. I
Um,
imagine also that they'll be talking a lot.
Probably so, yeah, probably so. um, it's like a hippie commune type thing, but
Oh,
there's a
that really is the best.
yeah,
Let me
yeah.
at them. They'll really get Dhamma.
It's called Dhamma Day, so um, uh, but there's an artist commune in Northwest Arkansas on a mountain, and it's part of that. Um, so I was going to ask about um, jhanas, what you thought. I'm getting to this point. I don't know. I'm getting to this point in my longer meditations, even my shorter meditations, where I'm getting this real stillness and very still, and I can feel my breath through my entire body, and it feels like I don't really have to worry about monkey mind or mind chatter anymore. It's like I'm separate from that, and I'm just like where I'm at. It couldn't really be. I like it. I don't want to do anything. I'm like, I don't want to do anything but meditate at that point. When the timer goes up, I don't want to leave,
All right. All right. You're giving a fairly clear description of first jhana.
Yeah.
And that first jhana is actually required by the Buddha in order to actually see the Four Noble Truths correctly. So congratulations, you're on the path.
Cool.
And that the way that you're getting there, the one point that you need to consider doing more and more and more of is the development of the joy, the development of the feeling of success. Instead of I like it, it's wow, I really like it.
All right.
Okay. Allow that joy to manifest itself so that joy actually begins to take over.
Mm-hmm.
Only when the joy itself completely takes over and consumes you can you go into the higher jhanas.
Yeah.
And so that's what needs to be worked on, is that joy. That holy cow, this stuff is good. Ooh.
Yeah, I think I get that. I get that. I've maybe gone that far once where I just sort of gave in to the joy and it kind of just percolated in my body, like I felt it. But I've been getting into that zone, that flow state reliably,
Okay.
almost.
So start saturating it then with joy.
Yeah.
The joy
Cool.
itself will be the cohesion in the mind. The cohesion of the mind comes with joy. And that cohesion is what we're talking about then, is the process of the cohesion is making the mind unified, the samadhi mind. And joy is a critical ingredient.
Mm.
The joyful attitude is basically the attitude that, wow, this is good stuff and I really like it. I can just sit here and enjoy it. There's no place to go, nothing to do. Just sit here and like what's happening because it's pretty good stuff. And
Yeah.
that's the noble mind. And so we want to start developing that. You've got the pillow sati going. So now we need to get the chair sati going. You've also got the steadiness of mind of that first jhana that you've got on the couch or on the cushion. All you need to do is to add the joy to complement it, to break it into full jhana. That basically what you've gotten is that you've gotten the path of jhana, but you haven't gotten the fruit yet. The fruit is that overwhelming joy.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the next point is with the sati, you want to be able to start developing, giving yourself that overwhelming joy every time you sit down in the chair. Wow. Ooh, that's so good.
Yeah.
So that you can get it quickly. You take control of it. You can go in and out of jhana at will.
Yeah. It feels like I'm getting to that point where, but I still have certain times a day, like I have trouble in the morning. Meditating in the morning is tough. for whatever reason. I'm fighting the monkey mind in the morning.
Here's the trick. Always go back when that is going on to the deep, deep breath. Step one of Anapanasati. More than likely, the mind needs air.
Yeah.
Needs that breathing going. Because otherwise, without the frontal cortex really charged up, that puts the monkey mind back into control. That puts that reptilian brain back into all over the place. So make sure that you're getting breathing.
Yeah.
Make that deep breath every time you can remember it. That's part of every time you come back. Every time you sit down, every time you catch the mind wandering away, you start with step one again, the beginner's mind. That's that long, deep breath. Get the mind oxygenated.
Just going to tell you about this one moment I had. I got lost in thought and I didn't realize it. And whatever my mind was doing was so ridiculous. The way I was caught in thought, and I said, and I finally, the only way I could get out of it, I said, "Aha! I caught you, you son of a bitch!" I said it out loud, and it worked.
It
I
does.
came back.
See, I told you so. Yes, exactly right. That's exactly right. But that's when you change your attitude.
Yeah.
That was the change of attitude. So now that you know what to do, so that it takes that really strong change of attitude, even every time you sit down in the chair, to really give yourself that really best moment.
Yeah.
So excellent. That's really great. You've actually put it in practice that one time, and when you got it.
Yeah, it turned that whole session around. It was like, yeah, I was back.
It'll turn your whole practice around.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the that aha moment. That's what we call vipassana. That's insight.
Yeah.
And you can have a little vipassana every time you say, aha, I caught you. I can see you now. Just like that strobe light going off. Every once in a while, you pick out something brand new that you haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And then you say, aha, I caught you.
Sometimes it seems like you're going back to square one, but I can
Yes.
tell, you know.
Yes. But we're going back to square one over and over again with a little bit more experience, a little bit more skill,
Yep.
a little bit more self-confidence that you can do it again and do it again and do it again. Never mind, start again. That's what Kowenka said. That's exactly right.
There.
So yeah, great. Well, I'll let you go check on your kid, and I'll
Right.
go find something to not do.
Sounds great.
All righty, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.